across the lake from here, Seneca Story from the Niagara Escarpment area. And I will begin. Now, Renalong was a fine boy, but sometimes he just hurried too much and made some bad mistakes. Now, he was running along this time along the trail when he noticed a berry bush, and it was the first ripe berries of the season. Oh, he stopped and he put one of those berries into his mouth. Oh, how it tasted. He even closed his eyes, it tasted so good, and then he opened them to get another, and his mouth dropped open. There was a big pile of bones with two skulls on top. One was obviously human and the other some big animal. A little thrush came along. "Oh, I'm so happy you're here," said the thrush. "We can make them come to life again." "I'm no shaman," said Renalong. "No, all you have to do is carry the bones for me. Nearby is a spring that has healing water. All you have to do is carry the bones." So Renalong bundled up the bones and followed the little bird to the spring, which only dropped one drop of water a day. It took a whole year to fill up the silent stone cup. "Now this is what you do," said the bird. "You lay out the bones in order, and then sprinkle the water, and I will sing the incantation and bring them together again." So Renalong hurried and laid out the bones and sprinkled the water, and the little bird sang the incantation. And the creatures came to life. They grew flesh, and then they grew skin, one kind of a light brown skin, and the other all covered with fur. And they sat up, but on the head of a man was a bear's head. And on the head of a bear was a man's head. "Oh, I've mixed them up," said Renalong. "Quick, undo it so they're right." "It will take a whole year for the silent stone cup to fill again," said the little bird. "They will have to do as they are." Now the one with the bear's head in the man's body took a look at Renalong and thought, "Man, hunter," and it crashed off into the bush. But the one with the man's head sat up. It was Deer Button. Deer Button, who had gone missing 2 years ago, right from Renalong's village. What happened?" And Renalong kind of explained, "Well, get my body back." "You can't for a full year," said Deer Button. I'll take you back to your wife. She's going to be surprised." And so they started back toward the village. When they got to the palisades of the village, the dogs came out barking and snapping, and Renalong had to beat them off, for they smelled bear. And that brought all the village people to the gate, the chief, all the people, including Pudding Spoon, Deer Button's wife. Well, they went to that gate, and they saw this beast, and the men raised their spears, and the chief too, and so Renalong ran in front of Deer Button. "Wait," he said, "I can explain." "That's my husband's face," said Pudding Spoon. "Are you a ghost?" "Oh, I'm no ghost. It's just I have this body of a bear." Well, so Renalong explained it to them all, and that was the only thing they could really understand, so they accepted his story, strange as it was. Well, the chief said to Pudding Spoon, "Will you take back your husband?" And she said to him, "When you lay in bed with me, did you take your clothes off?" "Yes, indeed," said Deer Button. "Well, you're not coming in bed with me unless you can take that bearskin shirt off." Well, the chief laughed at that and said, "Run along, this is your responsibility. You caused this, so you take him with you." And Run Along thought that was a good idea. He would have someone who thought like a man and lived like a bear. That might be really interesting. He fixed a place in his lodge for him to lie in, but as soon as Bear got on the bed, he broke it. Whenever Run Along tried to teach him anything, he understood, but he couldn't do any of the things with his big clumsy paws. And he was more trouble than a nest full of baby raccoons. Well, and he was hungry. He would eat everything Run Along gave him. He'd go to the neighbors and get what he could from them. He'd even dig in the ground for grubs. He'd do anything for food, and he got fatter and fatter till he could hardly fit through the door. And the summer was passing along by then. "Why do you eat so much?" said Run Along. "I don't know, I'm just hungry," said Deer Button. And then finally one morning, Run Along woke up and Deer Button wasn't there. It was the first snow of the year, and he couldn't trail him anymore. The tracks had been covered. He went out to look. It was his responsibility. He was worried. Had his body, had his instinct kicked in, and had he gone to hibernate? Is that what had happened? He walked along looking for him, and he didn't find him, but he found the bare footprints of a person. Now, who would be out in such weather without moccasins or snowshoes? And so he followed those tracks, and he came to the other half of his mistake. There was the one with the bear's head and the man's body. Most of the clothes had worn away and were he was scratched and ragged and terribly thin. "You can come back with me to your home." "To your wife?" said Deer Button. "My wife? My wife had 2 cubs and ran off in the spring." "No, not that wife. You have a human wife." Okay, so he took him to the human wife. He took him back to the village. He said, "It's going to be all right." And he went back to the village, and this time the dogs ran out and wagged their tails and licked at his hands because Deer Button had been a great favorite with them. And so he didn't make much of a fuss at the door. He took him right to the lodge of Pudding Spoon, the wife. And the one with the bear's head went in. He smelled the corn soup cooking on the big fire. There were little babies and papooses nestled against the wall. There were toddlers playing. A lot of the women were cooking, including Pudding Spoon. But he went there and he grabbed that pot, but it burned his paws. And he yelped and he threw the soup, and everybody screamed. The babies cried and the toddlers ran and hid. "Get that thing out of here," said Pudding Spoon. "But this is your husband," said Run Along. "Listen, he's very weak from hunger. We can hold him down easily." And they did that. They held him down, and Pudding Spoon tossed him a couple of loaves of bread. "Now, what am I supposed to do with this?" she said. "Feed him grubs?" And Run Along thought Pudding Spoon was a difficult woman to deal with. But he said, "You know, it can be very helpful. Look, I could teach it to chop wood. I could teach it to do chores." Pudding Spoon said, "Well, we'll try." And, well, truth be known, Pudding Spoon was pretty happy and did allow him in her bed and said to her friends, "He thinks like an animal." Well, so the winter passed. The one with the bear's head helped out everyone with chores. It was friendly. It even played with Run Along. It learned the games like Snow Snake and loved to play with him. It was almost like having a pet. And so the winter passed. And eventually, coming in thin and gaunt was the other half. The one with the bear's body, and the man's head came back. Deer Button "What are you doing here?" said Pudding Spoon. "Well, I'm back, my dear. I can stay with you. That's what I'm worried about," said Pudding Spoon. Well, wait," said Run Along. Look who's coming." It was the little thrush again. It was time to go back to that silent well, to the spring. And so they followed, the one with the bear's head, the one with the man's head, Run Along leading them, the little thrush flying in front, and all the village followed. "Now, lie down very carefully, but if we have to chop off heads, I think you should save me first," said Dear Button with his head. "That's what I'm worried about," said Pudding Spoon. The little thrush said, "I have an incantation. It won't be necessary to chop off heads. Just lay them there and sprinkle the water from the silent stone cup on their heads and necks." And so the water was sprinkled and the heads exchanged. Bear woke up and looked. Oh, there was Dear Button that he'd fought. There were other men that were hunters with spears that ran off into the woods. And only Dear Button was left with his head back on. Pudding Spoon, I'm a whole man again. Will you take me back?" She went there and she twisted his neck to make sure it stayed on. She said, "Well, as long as you don't break the bed or do anything else foolish like a bear, I will take you back." And so it was done. And that's the end of our story. Thank you.